This oral history of museum computing is provided by Marty Spellerberg and was recorded on the 5th of February 2021 by Paul Marty and Kathy Jones.
I start counting my sort of museum focus from that time. I guess I would say I've been doing websites since I was a teenager, right? I'm that age. And coming out of college, I'll go back a little bit further from the HO, but coming out of college, I went to art school and I tried to do websites in school, but you couldn't really. So I did integrated media was what they had, was closest. Coming out of school, I was approached by a gallery to show my web work in the gallery. And so we tried it. It felt so weird. I just felt weird, right? So I ended up saying, well, can I put something on the gallery website? They said, sure. And then eventually I just started updating the gallery website. And that became, I was like, this feels right. This feels like a good place for me, you know? And that was coming right out of college. So that sort of began a thread of work. I ended up at the Toronto International Film Festival for a year. And that was like this hothouse environment where you just work all the time to get the festival out. It was really a lot of fun, but it's kind of a burnout place. They kind of count on that. It's just the culture of a film festival. And so from there, I applied to an opening at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And we had at the film festival, when I first got there, there was no such thing as a content management system. And so during my year there, that was something that I worked on. And I was like, guys, there's got to be a way we can do this, you know? And so we had built a content management system. And then when I interviewed at the Art Gallery of Ontario, that's exactly where they were at. Their headspace was at. They were like, they didn't have one. They wanted one. I was talking about one. They were like, okay, you can come work here. So that was, they were closed. They'd been closed they were doing this expansion with a new Frank Gehry remodel of the building, an extension of the building. And they hired the web team a year out from the reopening. And I was on the internal team. It was me and a colleague and a boss. And we worked on that for the year. Well, I'll tell this story. I guess I could tell. Might as well tell this story. We were working with an outside agency, and that had been chosen, and we were facilitating with them. And this crazy thing happened where the outside agency, they heard what we wanted. They said, okay, well, we think that there's this developer who we want to bring on to work with you guys. And so we were working with this developer, and he was building out the CMS implementation. And he had it on his local machine, all his work. And he disappeared. Like, he just disappeared one day. And we didn't hear from him. He didn't show up for a meeting. We called the agency. We were like, hey, do you know where this guy is? They said, no. They called, the agency called like around. They said they called his like family and stuff. No one ever found him. And he took and no one ever found the code either. And it completely threw off our timelines. So that was, and the agency, it was a scramble for them. They were now in a bad spot because they were way behind and behind on budget. What we ended up doing, the internal team ended up taking so we had to launch. The building was reopening, right? The public all eyes were on this thing. We ended up just taking the design that we'd been working on and applying it to all our old stuff. We just applied the design. Everybody's like, hey, new website. It wasn't really the new website, but it looked like a new website. And when the agency finally got around to, because they were so far behind in their work, when they finally got around to delivering the work, the new backend, we just sort of like we just quietly put that in, and then that was um, but that really that experience really influenced how I approached my work, my when I was building out projects. And so I was at the AGO for I think 3 years, and by the end of 3 years, we were all of the projects that were kind of we had started when I initially started were kind of finished, and we were kind of looking at I was kind of looking at like what's on the plate for the next couple of years, and it was all kind of new stuff. And I thought, okay, this is a good moment to to do a lot. I was looking for like a lifestyle change. I was living in Toronto, and I was really inspired by Nina Simon, who a writer, and she was the director of the Santa Cruz Mob. But this is before she was a Santa Cruz Mob. She was a consultant and a writer, and she had come and given a presentation. It was the dead of winter in Toronto. She comes and she's tanned, and she shows this slide in her presentation, and she's like, yeah, I live in the mountains, and I live in a tree house. And she shows this photo of like outside, like the top of the trees, and she's like, yeah, I was working on this presentation, this is the view. And I was like, oh my God, there's and she was such an inspiration in the like, you don't have to, you can do this work in a different way, like from a different lifestyle point of view. So I left Toronto. I moved down here to Austin. I have family here. The sun shines here, and that's what I was looking for. And I didn't know at first what kind of work I was going to do. I kind of came out just to, get a reset. But I was fortunate to be able to continue to do this kind of museum work, this as a freelancer, as an independent freelancer. And I ended up working. Nina Simon ended up becoming the executive director of the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, and she put out this call. She says, "I need a web developer," and I said, "I'll do it," And she didn't really remember me, I think, from the presentation, because she meets so many people when she's doing her consulting. But I, of course, remembered her, and told her the story of what had happened, how like my approach to websites and being very iterative and collaborative with the internal team, and my whole story about being very risk averse. That was kind of this track that came out of that experience. And so anyway, she was totally into that, into it enough to say yes to me, I suppose. And so I started working for her on their website, and I worked on that website the entire time that she was the executive director there. And when she left, they handed it to a sort of an agency right there in Santa Cruz, and that I think makes a lot of sense. But I was thinking of talking about the visitor motivation project, visitor motivation survey from a few years ago, because it touches a few different institutions, and I thought that might be a bit fun. This project starts at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago. The way I started working with the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago is I knew from my high school days, I used to be in a web design club, online web design club, and a bunch of us went on to become web developers as our job. And so I was friends with someone from those days who was the web developer, happened to be the web developer at MCA Chicago. And he was miserable in his job. And whenever I was in Chicago, we'd get together and we'd have beers, and he would tell me about how miserable he was, which I guess is not really relevant to the story, except one day he quit. He was like, that's it, enough of that for me. And so then they said, he recommended I get in touch with them. And so I started with the MCA Chicago. It was meant to be a temporary thing, just while they found somebody. But that's when I met Sarah Wambold was the, I guess, manager of digital at that point. She later got a promotion, and she's been like a very close collaborator, creative collaborator ever since. But that's how I met her. Anyway, so the VMS, she had seen it was presented at, I think, MW, a visitor motivation study by the, it was created by the IMA lab, and she was really impressed by that study. It was a survey that would pop up and they'd say, why did you come to the website today? And she showed me this, and she said, we should do this. We should do this study. We should do one of these. I said, okay. So she knew Gray Bowman at the IMA lab, and he very generously shared their source code with us and shared their technique, which was about tagging Google Analytics with a custom segment. So he showed us how to do that. And we, at the MCA Chicago, we ran that. We ran the same study that they ran with the same questions that they ended up running. And we did a report from that. And it was pretty good, Okay, now switch back over to Santa Cruz. So at the same time, I'm working for Santa Cruz, and I'm doing stuff at Santa Cruz. And Santa Cruz says, well, we need to make their website responsive, right? It wasn't responsive. We needed to put in responsive design. So I started researching that, and I read, there's a book called Mobile First, and I read that book. And it said, you got to figure out what your key actions are. Your visitors, what are the key actions that they're trying to accomplish when they get to your site? Because in a small screen, you want to surface those. That's what they're trying to do. So you want to surface those. I was like, okay, key actions. So then I thought, okay, well, we need to know more about our audiences. We probably need to develop some personas. And it was either at MCN or MW earlier that year, I'd seen, I think it was a lightning talk by Ari Lee. Was she at the Getty at that time? She was at the Getty at that time, I think. Pretty sure. And I remembered this presentation. I was like, oh, that's great. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, would you give your presentation to the team at myself and my colleagues at the MA? And I was working with someone named Elise Granada at the MA. She was the marketing and engagement person. And she said, sure, absolutely. So she gave that presentation. She re-gave that lightning talk and was very generous with her time and just talked us through that. And at the end of that presentation, she mentioned, she was like, if you're really interested in visitor motivation, you need to read John Falk's book. And Elise was sitting there and she's like, oh yeah, I have that book right here. And she pulled it off her desk and she was like, yeah, Nina gave me this when I started the job. Nina said, read this. And I said, oh, okay, I need to read this book, right? So I ordered a copy of the book. And of course it says on Amazon, it says frequently often bought with Nina Simon's book, right? Which I had already read. So I read John Falk's book, and I was like, oh, this is gold. This is solid gold right here. And I distinctly remember calling Sarah Wambold, who was at that point, Sarah had moved from the MCA Chicago to the Clifford Still Museum in Denver because she wanted to move to Denver. And as part of her lifestyle, right? She just wanted to live there. So she moved there, got that job. She was working there. I'd been working with her. Anyway, I was like, this is great. You need to read this book. And I said, I think I said, we could redo the visitor motivation study, but instead of the questions that we asked before, we could ask questions motivated by the, like, based on these motivations in this book. And she was like, that's fantastic. And I think I said, we could do this on the Clifford Still Museum website. And then, but she said, yeah, we could do it on the Clifford Still Museum websites, but we've been meeting all these people at these conferences we've been going to. Why don't we ask them if they want to do it too? And I said, okay, let's do that. And so we did that, and we ended up with 24, institutions doing it. Learned a lot about why people use museum websites. I think at that point, I've been doing museum websites for like 10 years by that point, and maybe a little bit less. But in doing that study, I realized that I'd been doing it all wrong. I wasn't focused on I was focused on the wrong people. I was focused on the museum. I wasn't focused on the users. I guess up to that point, I had thought of museum websites as there's all these constituents within the museum, and they all have these wonderful programs, and we got to get them up there. But doing that work really changed my perspective from being focused internally on asking inside what would you guys like to see on the website, to really looking outside to what them. So let's see. To wrap that up, we ended up doing a personas-based homepage for the Santa Cruz MA. We ended up changing the Clifford Still Museum homepage to really present a much more social image. We realized that we'd been presenting a lot of photographs of empty galleries, and according to Falk's research, or Falk's framework, that it's not the way. And we ended up at MCN one year. We got a bunch of the study participants. We did an hour of basically lightning talks where different study participants talked about how they use this, what they learned from the study, and how they implemented it, what it meant for their institutions. And each one kind of took a different, it was different for each one. So anyway, then I got the bug for doing these studies, and then when COVID hit last year, I, like everyone, was freaking out, just trying to make sense of the world. And I had been already thinking about doing another study. I'd enjoyed that process so much. So when COVID hit last year, that's when I spun up another one, the simpler one. It was just to look at website traffic data. It didn't have as much of a theoretical. It didn't have a theoretical base like the other one did, like the Falk one did. But that's, we presented on that last season, and now we're doing one about virtual events. Also, another little coda is I remember when John Falk got in touch after we did that study, I was thrilled. That he's a living person who writes you emails. Like, to me, he was this idea, right? But he's actually a person, and he wrote us a very nice email. And then I ended up doing some work for him last year, doing some work for his company, and on their graphics and their website, and that was a real thrill and a real pleasure.
Marty, I really don't want to jump in, but I just need to explain why I'm grinning from ear to ear, because just yesterday in my usability analysis class here at FSU, I gave my lecture on why personas are so important when doing website design. Yeah. So, it's just wonderful to hear you talking about that experience of using persona. It's exactly what I was saying to my students yesterday. Shoot, I wish I had you there to tell them what you just said.
Well, yeah. I'd be happy to, and they should all read Falk's book.
Yeah, I usually don't assign that to my usability students, but I do give it to my museum students, right? Super important.
Right. Yeah, that was, yeah. I mean, like I say, I realized after doing that study that I have this idea, this is my idea. I have this idea that most museum websites, the way they're normally designed, we surface all the stuff that's going on in the museum, and because it's all great, it works it works well enough. You know, it works. People go there and they think, oh, this is really interesting. This exhibition looks cool. This talk looks cool, right? But to my view, we're making the audience do work that we should be doing. We're making them, they have to make that association between the program that we're presenting, which is a great program, but they have to make the association of how that's relevant to their life. And the only, like I say, the only reason we get away with it is because our programs are compelling, right? They're all great. But really, we should be taking on that burden, and we should be making the case for, we should be understanding what's going on in their life, what they're motivated by, and presenting our offerings as fulfillment of their needs. And we should be doing that mental work so that when they look at what we're offering, it's clear to them. It's obvious. I mean, we've done that. We've said, if you're looking for a social activity, the museum's a great place. If you're looking for, and we should show that in the way we present the way we do our design, and in the way we present our programs, the imagery that we bring forward, the photography that we use. If you're the kind of person who's trying to do all the best stuff in town, you're in town and you want to do the stuff, we're the place for that. Or if you want to come and recharge over your lunch break, we're the place for that. But we should know what kind of, we should do that work, that mental work, that cognitive work, so that the visitor doesn't have to. And
so I want to jump in too on that. And, you know, I love that perspective of taking John Falk's work and letting that be the framework for how you design a website. In my experience, I haven't heard anybody say that before, so I think it's really great. But what you just said about doing the work for the visitor, have you also read George Hines' work on constructivism?
Not. I will write it
might
down.
be something, because one of the things that he talks about is making meaning, and that when visitors come to the museum, they come in with their whole lives behind them, but then you're giving them a new and fresh experience to weave into that life experience so that they come out with something very different. And I mean, I really do love the way that you're thinking about how a website can be developed. So I won't say too much more, but one of the things that I do want to say is that often, even though we're trying to break down silos in museums, we don't really. And if we use an outsourced web designer who has no museum experience, never, you know, kind of lived the life in the museum, they're not going to get it the way that you did. And I just looked at the Clifford Still website, and it totally shows me the type of inclusion that I think you were striving for. So just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Well,
but I needed
and I should clarify something about the current Clifford Still site is that
Oh, you didn't do it.
they changed it last year.
Okay.
So, right, my engagement finished, and they changed it.
Well,
So,
but maybe you gave them food for thought about what to do.
Right. And I just have to say that I've heard so many stories about people who lost data or lost systems, right, because of a crash. I don't think I've ever heard a story about somebody who just disappeared.
No,
Data with them.
I haven't either. That's totally strange.
I know. And it was, I mean, it really, there's little things that I still do that are inspired by that. Like, I mean, that was, we didn't have GitHub, of course, back then. So that would have solved the problem. I also wonder what he was working. I mean, what he was working on. He was a very creative developer. He had a concept he thought, oh, like they had brought him in because we described what we wanted, and they said, we think this guy, but I guess I don't know what was going on with him in his personal life, but there's still little things like I like to make a GitHub account for the institution if they don't have one already, and I like to just work there and deliver code there, because like, yeah, what if I got hit by a bus or something? And I wouldn't want to subject the people who came after me to being like, well, I don't know, we don't have the source code. Like, we don't, it was a real problem, and it was a real problem for the agency too, because they had to put developers who didn't understand the other guy's work. Like, the product we got wasn't it didn't have what he was trying to do with it, because it was just not documented. Also, I'll say one other thing now that it's all coming back. We had spent so long speccing that thing out. Like, we spent the entire summer in like these meetings where we would discuss what we wanted, and we had these really lengthy spec documents. When it came down to it and we lost all that code, the spec documents didn't do us any good at all, because the museum was opening. We needed to launch a website, and you can't launch a spec. They were all just wishes. They were all wishful thinking. They weren't so then that influenced me, especially early on after that, to be very iterative and to do to not I'll mention another, and maybe you've read this book. This was from when I was at the film festival, the Toronto International Film Festival. I became kind of interested in project management, and I started reading a lot more about project management. And first I bought this O'Reilly book on project management, and it was like pretty standard stuff. It was pretty standard project management stuff, but it kept on referencing Extreme Programming Explained, which is Kent Beck. And I read Extreme Programming Explained, and I was like, oh, this is it. This is the way to do it. And it was like Agile before Agile was had more around it. And just, I guess, suffice to say that really influenced my approach after that. After doing all that planning, which I guess we'd call waterfall planning, right? Saying, no, that's not the way to do it. Build the website out, get it to a place where you can this came straight from the AGO thing. Get it to a place where you could conceivably launch it as is, no matter what else you want, what you desire for the website to have your working copy be launchable, because what if you needed to launch it? And then iterate on it and improve it. Key man insurance. What's key man insurance?
It's what GitHub does for you now. I'll make it quick. So in the early days of MCN, when MCN was a software vendor, if you will, they had to have key man insurance for Jack Heller, so that if anything happened to Jack, there would be enough money to recreate what he had done.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm sure he kept the code in an archive too, but still,
right.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
I like this focus on iterative design, right? I teach our usability and our UX courses for our undergraduate information technology program here. And I can tell you, it's sometimes hard to get buy-in from our IT students of that is so important, taking that iterative approach. How have you sold that to the museums that you work with?
Well, I think when I talk about it, I explicitly did this when I was first introducing myself to Nina in Santa Cruz, because it was so fresh for me then. It was still just the last experience I had. And as a form of risk mitigation, I sort of just as why take unnecessary risk? And and telling a story of a project gone horribly wrong, or maybe not wrong, but pear-shaped, not as planned. That goes a long way. I'll often a way that often it manifests now is when we're trying to do, often they'll want to do a platform change and a redesign together. You know, that's often like, oh, we don't like our platform, we want to change platforms, and we also want to, you know, redesign the site. I'll often split those into two, where we'll do the platform change first with the existing site. And that way we know, well, first of all, it often solves a major problem. They're often having problems with their platform, and that's, you know, why they undertake a redesign in the first place. And then we're basing the redesign, we have on our platform, we can iterate from there. We can do the design iteratively. We can push the design towards our desired information architecture, our desired aesthetic. But we now know that we have built, the new website will at least do everything the old website did, because it's built on top of the old website. And conceivably could be launched at the drop of a hat. You say, okay, we gotta stop, we gotta launch this thing. You know, the public doesn't know all the things that you wanted to do with your website that you didn't get around to doing. If you tie it all up together and you can't launch the thing till you've completed all of those items, then you don't have that option of putting the site out when you need to. Then you have this spec document that's sort of dictating these other. You're kind of stuck to it. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of tell people it's my process, and they kind of go for it. I think I used to be a lot more explicit about it, but now that it's been a number of years, it's not as raw for me. So I don't lead with it, but it still has, it still influences my process.
And I would also say, right, that one of the nice things about doing the platform change first in that example is that you get a better understanding of what the new features and functionalities are before you get into the redesign, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What if you did it both at the same time and realized there was some opportunity you had missed, right?
Right. And that, well, you know, right. And even if you're really thinking, well, our content strategy isn't working, we need to change out our content strategy. You know, there's so much of it is, you know, there's just all this stuff that people in the museum depend on, you know, all their input forms working, and them having these sort of databases sort of deep in the bowels of the site that, you know, maybe they don't get a lot of attention, but they have to be there. And so you clear out that work, and then what's left is the stuff that you kind of want to, you know, the stuff you want to focus on, but you know that it's there. You don't find yourself, right. This is a thing that happened at the film festival. That was really why I started reading all of this project management stuff and this iterative stuff. Is we missed a deadline. Our team missed a deadline because we needed to put in all the copy. We had all the content in Word, and the pre-sales were supposed to go live, but we had the system done, but we didn't have the copy in it, and we just had to scramble to put all the copy in it. And, you know, that was, you just want to learn from those situations, and try to build systems around, you know, not you know, you want to make new mistakes. You don't want to make this mistake over and over and over again.
Well, and I think that we're back to the value of MCN and museums and the web. In fact, I think I once gave a lightning talk on this topic at Museums and the Web, the challenges of how do we stop making the same mistakes over and over again, which is hard to do, right? As we all know.
I think Agile is it's a well-known methodology, and I have to say I could learn a few things from the practitioners who are coming in now, and you know, really adopting a full Agile process. And, you know, I haven't had the, you know, I came upon my process from my own experience, but I know it's something that a lot of software development, it's like just that's how it's done these days.
Marty, could you say a little bit more about the virtual event project that you're doing now, and when you might publish that?
Yeah, so we're doing it now. Right now we are building up the cohort and working on our survey instrument. This came directly out of a MCN SIG conversation from last season. There was a thread about KPIs, how to measure success of virtual events, and there was a call, and people were talking. You know, it was just a roundtable call; anybody could speak. And someone in the chat said it would be useful to be able to compare KPIs across institutions. And I immediately thought, well, my team, we know how to do that. It's I have a researcher working with me. Her name is Grace Poole. She came on in the summer, last summer, to work on the COVID research. And the person said that. I don't know who it was that said that in the chat, but I thought, we could probably do that. We know how to coordinate these things, or whether we know how or not, we've done it. Whether we do it right or not, we have some experience with it. So the next day I went on the chat, or I went back on the boards and I said, if people want to do this, we'd be happy to coordinate it. So we are working on the cohort now, and please spread the word. You know, the larger the cohort, the better the research. We have the basis of our survey instrument there's the initial idea for the thing, and now there's a second idea that we might be adding. The initial idea is that if we give everybody a spreadsheet that says what were your events in 2020, and here's a tab for 2021, and just fill in rows of like, when was it, on all the attributes, how many people came, what was the goal of the event, what medium was it ticketed, was it RSVP? We have all the, just all these columns. People just fill it in. I think for 2020, they'll fill in with whatever they've got. Maybe with 2021, they can fill in, they can use this. And then we'll just chart it out. We'll look for patterns. I don't know that we have so much of an hypothesis other than that we will find patterns. And then the second aspect that's sort of bubbling up from it is we might do something about a post-visit. I think people have been doing post-visit surveys, so that's something we might add as a sort of a second piece, an optional piece, if people want to do that. Or if everybody kind of asks the same questions in their post-visit surveys, then maybe we can draw some conclusions from looking at those in aggregate. So yeah, right now we're still accepting people. It's open to everyone. Anyone who hears about it wants to do it. And it's, yes, fill in these spreadsheets, and then we're going to look at them, and maybe we'll talk to some people, kind of like you're doing now, people who seem to have some interesting returns. And
could you share the link with us for that?
Yeah. And then in terms of, Sarah and I wrote a paper for that VMS one. And that was a great experience. I remember Sarah kind of having to twist my arm to write the paper. I was like, but Sarah, we're so busy. She's like, no, we got to write this paper, So, but that was great, because then now we have this thing that we can send around. And so I intend to write a paper. I thought we would do one about what we learned last year, but then this new opportunity came up to do the virtual events. So I guess we're going to just do this, and then when the time seems right, maybe write up something that maybe incorporates both. I'm not sure. We'll see what I have a link. Let me see. It's bit.ly. I'll pull it up. I'll send you that as well. I have a bit.ly link for our form. We have an Airtable where we're collecting.
I'm also really pleased to learn that you designed the Santa Cruz Museum website. It's funny because whenever in my museum informatics class, when I do the lecture on participatory museum, that's the first slide I show them, right? So there you go.
Right, and again, that one, that the way it is now is not the one that I did back then. It's changed since as things go. I guess, this is to finish up on the Falk thing. Just one site, and I think of it because the site's been changed since. I mean, I do the Warhol Museum, the website for the Warhol Museum still, and it's changed. We had to change it for COVID. But speaking of the Falk, going back to the Falk study, until COVID, that was really, I think, the crew at the Warhol had taken part in the Falk study before they initiated their redesign. So they were like all in on that. Their results on the Falk study came back with the facilitators, Falk's facilitators. Does he call them facilitators, or did we rename them that for our study? I have to check. But the idea that people are coming for a social experience. So we redesigned, when we redesigned that site, we did it fully informed by that. We did a lot of user, or a lot of we had the VMS, and then we had the we did personas, and we did all of that. And so that was a site that was very, very focused on the idea of presenting like the experience, showing the experience that you would have. That was a conclusion that we drew from their user research, that we wanted to show the experience of being at the museum. It was also a response to, we couldn't foreground Andy Warhol artwork like you might want to in a situation like that, due to licensing restrictions. So we said, okay, we're not going to foreground the artwork. We wouldn't want to, because we want to foreground the experience. So we really designed that website around the experience. And we reshot. One of the things we did for that is we had all the photography redone. This is another thing we did. Nina had a rule in Santa Cruz. She had a rule, just coming from where she was coming from, that in order for a photo to make it on the homepage, it had to show happy people, right? It was a community museum. We wanted to show the community. And that's something that we've continued on. When we did that homepage for them, which was, right, part of that story sort of jump around a little bit, but when we did that homepage for them, the result was that we identified these audiences that they serve. And in order for a program that the museum was doing to be featured on the homepage, we had to make an association with the serving of an audience. So we had the audiences defined in the CMS, and you'd say, which programs do we want to highlight that serve this audience? And we would have a key statement that would call out that we serve this audience, and then the programs would be used as evidence of how we, and so if you identify with that audience, you might click through and be interested in one of those programs. So we kind of took that further with the Warhol, where the whole page, the homepage was, what we called it internally was the Warhol experience. And museum programming would only appeared in that page a couple of places, and it would appear in support of the idea of the museum experience, as illustrative of the museum experience. Of course, we had to change it with COVID, because it was 100% designed around facilitating in-person visitation, and there's none, right? So the homepage that is there now, it doesn't exactly reflect, though a lot of the photography that you still see on that site is from that era, or from that redesign, the art direction of, sending like photos of not just the galleries, but people in the galleries, so that you can identify, you can see that person doing that, and you can say, oh, that's what I want to do. That's what, that's the venue for this thing that I want to do in my own life. Go on, takes people there, or go for recharge or something like that. So, Yeah, and that website's, I like to say, that website, we're in the process of doing there's some new work coming on that site, so it's going to change too. So as websites do, you build them and then they last for a few years and then change them.
You know, this focus on profiles and personas and building websites around those. Shoot, it reminds me of a conversation I had with a web developer at Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. What's his name? Chad something. I'd have to go look it up. And this must have been 10 years ago. But one of the things we were talking about was how he knew from Google Analytics that he could divide his website visitors into two extremely distinct categories that didn't overlap at all. People researching Thomas Jefferson and people who are planning a trip to Monticello.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he had always wanted to do was to design two different versions of his website and just direct them to whichever one they needed.
We've talked about that. We did talk about that with the Warhol. We thought that we might end up doing a second site that was because they had their vision at that time was articulated as we want to be the #1 destination for experiencing Warhol, and we also want to be the #1 destination online for learning about Warhol. So that was exactly what you're talking about. You know, just to talk about, you know, I don't know, you might have a hard stop, but just to say something about the COVID research from last year. I think of it as giving us a window into our non-visitor. We asked everybody what their strategy was for their website, and just about everybody said, you know, to support visitation. And when COVID hit, there was no more visitation, and in my reading of the results of that, you can really see the limits, or you can see the limits of that focus on visitation. Or if you are going to, I think of last year, the last year has been like a view on the people who aren't planning a visit. We finally, like, if we clear out everybody who is planning a visit, who is most of the people, then we now get this view of people who are not planning a visit. And maybe the lessons, if we look back at this last year of analytics, if we could draw conclusions on how to serve that online audience. Here's a little tidbit to off of what you were saying. The Met, this is what I understand from what I was told. Someone from there could say that this is not quite right. But my understanding is that the Met in New York has kind of two digital teams. And one is focused on facilitating the visitor experience, and one is focused on people. They think of themselves as a global institution serving a global online audience, and that's the second team. And they do stuff. That stuff is, they don't think those people are ever going to come to the museum, and I think that's interesting. Not everybody can have two teams. Most people can barely have one person, you know. But it's a way to think about your audiences. If you are right, that's one of your personas is they're not going to visit, but they're here to do research, you know, in one way or another. You know,
here we're back to reinventing the wheel too, right? Because late 1990s, paper after paper, you have to support the people who aren't going to visit, right?
Right.
All throughout the 2000s, I wrote quite a few in the early 2000s, right, making the same argument, right?
Right.
But as you say, when you go and talk to people in the museum, what's the audience you're supporting? The people who are going to visit. But what about all these other people?
Right. Right. And right. And there's been some really great conversations this year about these real questions about, okay, well, what's the business proposition for these people? You know, these people, because digital is it's expensive to do, or can be expensive to do, and serve these, so that's been these interesting conversations, and I'm really, I think we're all following them. Like,
one of the things that we can connect this to as well is, the Smithsonian strategic plan, where they're trying to reach 1 billion people a year, right? Obviously, they don't mean 1 billion people traveling to DC. They mean the Smithsonian having a connection to 1 billion people around the world.
Right. So, yeah, it's been of course, it's been an interesting year, and it changed. I'll just say one other thing, just about what I've sort of like taking the John Falk study, and then this COVID research. I'll just put this out there. I don't think exhibitions are as important as everybody thinks they are. I know we're on the record, so I'll say this for the record. I don't think the people who are visiting the museum, who are planning a visit, I think the exhibitions are like one aspect of what they're looking for when they're trying to plan out their visit. It's some people, it might be more than others, but I don't know that the exhibition is the thing. And for the people who are online only, I don't know that, and I say this as someone, if you were going to build digital products around an exhibition, this is just me pontificating. If you're going to build quality, I don't know that I would want to focus my digital efforts around my exhibition schedule, because I don't know that that serves the people who are trying to plan a visit. I'm not sure that that's what they're looking for, is digital doodads, really cool digital things. I think they're kind of just wanting to plan a visit and they want to know what's on. I don't want to get too far ahead, in front of my skis here, but then for online only people, I don't know that the exhibition schedule, which, is like whatever, 4-6 months, whatever, is enough time to do the kind of quality to make these investments in a quality digital program that is really going to serve the online only audience. So I might decouple those, and I might say, if we're going to do something for online, let's really look at what's going to be a lasting piece that we can create that's going to be really have value for a number of years, and the return on the investment of all the work that's going to go into it, and do as much around this. This could be something to study, actually. I think if I could think of a way to study this, I would like to study this.